Hello everyone, and welcome back to Shakur Or. I'm back here with the babies. Little babies. I actually haven't weighed them today, so I figured I would go ahead and weigh them on camera with you guys. So this is one of the girls. With the little girls. They're all started walking and talking and moving around. I weigh them each day just to keep track of whether they're progressing or if they're falling behind for some reason, just in case, because sometimes one can get bullied off and fall behind the others, or in the case of Pomeranians, it's to judge whether or not one's going to get large enough for a program, because with us we want larger Pomeranians. We're trying to breed them larger. So let me put that number in my phone real quick. I have this cool app. It's called Fido Polly that keeps track. I just put it in each day. And it keeps track of their percentages gained. I don't know if you can see it or not, but percentages gained during that day. And then I can go to an actual chart. It's bottomed out on all those because I haven't weighed them yet today, but keeps track of their progress. So it does the work for you. Here's the other girl. This is the one most likely we're going to keep. And it's not just due to her size. There are other reasons, but they're so young, we won't know for sure until they develop more. Hold on. You need to stay on there, baby. Okay, so she's somewhere in the 1,580, I think. Hard to tell. Generally, you want a 5% gain every day. It's a 5% of the weight total, accumulative and all of that. But that doesn't always happen, especially we've noticed when it comes to between the second and third week, there tends to be a slowdown, and then it'll pick back up again, especially once they start being introduced to softened food. We don't introduce softened food until they seem ready. And what do I mean by ready? Well, with the collies, it was kind of a very spontaneous thing. They showed interest in some treats that were in Peyton's pocket that she had forgotten about. So we just decided to start them there on that day. But we naturally wean, and what that means is, so even if we start feeding them softened food, I don't want to scare them, so I'm trying to wake them up first. We continue to let the mom feed them for as much as she wants to, until she decides that's enough or she dries up. Preferably dries up. This is the smallest boy. And the black, the all black, almost all black one I weighed just a second ago. What's the other boy? Okay, so that's that. I'm gonna let them toddle around the room if they want to while I talk to you guys. Now they may just go to sleep because they're babies. They don't usually stay awake very long. But we'll see. We'll just let them do their thing. So yes, we naturally weaned with Love Me. She continued to feed her puppies up until the point that she dried up. And we allowed her to do that. And the reason being is because it doesn't hurt the puppies whatsoever. We didn't have any issues at all in regards to, say, the puppies continuing to try to like nurse on other dogs or not wanting their food, because they ate the food just fine. It had more to do with what was good for them was that they still got to interact with their mom. Their mom still got to interact with them in that regard, nursing them. Hey, little girl. And for Love Me specifically, a lot of people will just cut the mom dog off from her puppies. Just straight up wean. They just cut the mom dog off. And when they do that, they're very prone to getting mastitis. So we prefer to just let them dry up while also nursing. And they will eventually dry up. It's just a natural process of it. They will dry up. I want to say Love Me dried up by week 8 or 9 with hers. And that's fine with us. We're perfectly fine with that. We believe it's better for the puppies and better for mom. And that's what we do. Mana is right here. He does not have the muzzle on because he's aggressive or anything like that. That is actually to prevent him from licking, because he has a bit of a skin problem at the moment. So I apologize if y'all hear him kicking up a fuss. Just being sassy. Just being sassy. Sassy. Yeah. Sillies. The silly babies. They've started growling and barking and carrying on. Yeah, see? Anyway, we haven't started them on any sort of food yet because they don't have teeth. Naturally, in the wild, all canids, the moms start introducing vomited up food that's partially digested to their puppies after they have teeth. And theirs have not erupted yet. So we won't do that until they have teeth. And Sassy is still feeding them. She feeds them about 3 or 4 times a day right now. Because she's got full milk, she doesn't have to feed them as often. No different from a human baby. He's gnawing on me. Oh, sorry. That's the girl. She's a little feisty. That's my only reservation at the moment. She's a little feisty. And she is. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I was going to talk about in regards to the puppies and moms specifically. I don't think so. But I was going to go into a different topic that Peyton hasn't wanted to breach yet, because a lot of people get up in a fuss about it, but I was going to talk about the effects of inbreeding. Now, all that I say either has some sort of scientific evidence or articles behind it, or it's basically kind of an observation that other people and ourselves have made. So it doesn't mean it's rock solid ground proof, but there's plenty to back it up. I also am not the one who's read most of it. Peyton has done the vast majority of the research, going over hours and hours of reading articles and being parts of groups that go into this kind of stuff. But regardless, I'm going to talk a little bit about the effects of inbreeding. A lot of breeders, particularly your show breeders or people that are breeding for a standard, will tote doing inbreeding on occasion for I see you, you're so cute. For maintaining the breed, and basically what they're doing it for most of the time is to solidify a particular kind of structure, because when you do inbreeding you can usually end up with high amounts of a particular kind of structure because the genes are so narrowed when you do that. But there are downsides. One of the biggest things when it comes to inbreeding that we've seen is definitely a no. Okay, so I'm going to just explain this real quick, what I just did there. Puppies as a whole, but Pomeranians especially, are extremely prone to humping. There's many reasons as to the possibilities why puppies do it and why some adult dogs are obsessive about it. It's not necessarily a reproductive or, what would you call it, overly sexual mindset, as it can actually be overstimulation, being really tired, being hungry when it comes to puppies. I'm specifically talking about humping in puppies. And it can also usually indicate an unstable mind because they're trying to compensate for something. They're all bundled in the corner. See, like right now, they're okay, wanting to go to sleep. There are occasions when dogs will use it for dominance, but most of the time there's a different reason. And when you have intact dogs, that also brings into other things, such as with all of our female dogs specifically, not the males, but the females tend to want to hump each other when the others are going into heat, or if they are actually displaying dominance toward each other. The females do it more than anything. The males don't. Our males really don't do that kind of stuff. Aside from yokai and Ami, they have a habit of it and we're trying to break them of it. But the other males do not. Hello, pretty girl. Are you listening? Are you listening? Whoops! So back to the inbreeding. So a lot of breeders, what they'll do is they'll usually breed back a daughter to a father, which when you do that once in a generational line, that's usually fine. But if you repeatedly do that, or do that too close within that line, and I don't know how to describe it other than when you actually look at a pedigree, you can see what I'm talking about and the way it looks. Because when we get dogs, we mark their pedigrees with any inbreeding they have ever had, and how many times, who was, what kind of dog, the dog's name. We're marking all that stuff with red flags. I mean, we literally put a red dot on their pedigree to mark an inbreeding. And the reason being is because you want to avoid putting too much of that into a pedigree. And you could get another dog to breed to that dog, and then they end up having some of the same dogs there. So you want to be careful in who you pair together. But a lot of people will do a father-daughter pairing. We don't approve of it really whatsoever, but a lot of people do it. There's also people that will do half siblings, and that gets into a whole nother mess. Half siblings usually go more wrong than a father-daughter pairing does. No one really knows why, but something about the genetics of half siblings compared to a father-daughter pairing causes more issues. And what do I mean by issues? Well, the most common thing that pops up in inbreeding is umbilical hernias and inguinal hernias. Hernias of any sort. There's also retained testicles in males. That's the most common sign of inbreeding. Now, there are non-genetic, that's what we call it. That would be a genetic deformity, likely caused by inbreeding. There are non-genetic flukes that happen. I talked about umbilical hernias before. Umbilical hernias can happen after birth when the mom is getting rid of the umbilical cord and the placenta. She can accidentally cause a hernia. Or even within the couple days after, as we found out with the little boy, is that they can obsess over a little foot, obsess over the cord and pull on the belly too much and cause a problem. Now I have a plan for next time to potentially eliminate that, but we'll have to see if it works. But regardless, that can cause an umbilical hernia. It is not always genetic, but because of the practices of what most people do when breeding dogs, and any animal, to be honest, any animal, you'll see it all across the board, is that it was due to inbreeding. So what inbreeding does, and it's been proven in animals and people, is it often causes the musculature and the walls within the belly to weaken, and that's what allows the hernias to occur. It also causes retained testicles. Retained testicles is when one or both of the testicles never descend into the scrotum. And obviously for a breeding prospect, that is a huge issue. Because the testicle that remains within the body, it is useless. It is often malformed and does not function. It's also just not right. I mean, it's a deformity of the body. Some of the other things that inbreeding can cause when it's multi-generational, but I would hazard a guess that it can happen even within a first line breeding, is what most people call it. Within a first inbreeding is that it can cause personality issues. And the reason behind that, aside from, say, someone just breeding two dogs together that don't have good temperaments, is because when animals or people inbreed, it actually causes the brain to not be able to produce serotonin. And serotonin is what regulates anxiety and aggression. So in an inbred dog, especially when they're heavily inbred, they can be extremely prone to high anxiety or random aggression that really doesn't make any sense, or high sensitivity. a good example of this, because we're not going to hide it from you guys, is Kazahana. When we originally got him, we were new to the whole thing, and we didn't think it through all the way. And we got him not knowing, because the guy didn't give the pedigree when we originally got him. He didn't show the pedigree. He was actually multi-generational inbred, and I'm not kidding about that. So with a AKC pedigree, when you get the full one, I think it's like 5 or 6 generations. You can go back and see all the dogs within those generations. This is a 64 dog generational pedigree. There's 64 dogs on it. He has 16 on a 64 dog pedigree that are unrelated to each other. He himself, his parents were siblings, their parents were siblings, and then their parents from there were father and daughter. That's how bad it is. And he has physical displays of this. He has PPM, which is persistent pupillary membrane. I can explain that more later on, because it's a little complicated. I'd rather have him in front of me. He had a very small umbilical hernia. Very small. But it can be a heck of a lot worse. Like so bad that you have intestines that they're down into the cavity of, they're no longer even in the dog's body. They're in the cavity of the hernia itself. But he had a really small one. And he also ended up with a retained testicle. But see, we didn't know this when we initially got him. The other thing we have run into, and we're not entirely sure if it's related to his inbreeding, but we're pretty sure it is that as soon as he hit maturity, the fantastic dog that he was kind of disappeared. We started having issues with him with showing aggression specifically toward Mana, Breo, and it kind of transitioned to some of the other ones, but it just wasn't quite the same intensity. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's just a male dog thing. Maybe, but honestly, what we're seeing in him, no, I don't think so. What he displays is a high amount of the inability to process a situation correctly, respond appropriately, and high sensitivity. Like he's just on edge. Now we have done things to help him, and things are getting a lot better. We can actually have him around everyone now. That's why there was a time when he wasn't out, is because we were trying to deal with that situation. Which if you guys knew more about our history, you would understand why this time period, this past couple months, have been very hard for us in regards to Kazahana. But I'm not going to go into that in this video. Regardless, we were struggling, and we were having to keep him separate till we could figure out whether or not we could help him, if there was a way to help him, and whether there was a way to potentially help him understand a situation, like he wasn't going to get hurt. Because that seemed to kind of be what it boiled down to, is that for some reason he got this idea in his head that when he was around the other dogs, he would somehow get hurt. A lot of nervousness. There was a lot of nervous, fractious behavior from him. So what Peyton did is she got him these special, their little doggy treats. And this is hopefully going to be temporary, because we're only using it as a means to try and not retrain, that's not the word, but re-expose him and try to get it back into his brain that everything's fine. But he may have to be on it for life. We're not really sure. But they are cannabis cookies. Okay, it's from a holistic pet company. We're not into that whole sort of thing, but we're doing it for him. But the big thing, it's not really necessarily about the cannabis, is that these cookies have a artificial. So what I was trying to say before the memory card got full again on me is that the cookies have a chemical in them that actually forces the brain to produce serotonin. And it's my opinion that that has helped him a lot. And that's the key thing with what happens with inbreeding. And this has been a scientific study. We're not just pulling this out of nowhere. It has been studied on both people and with lab rats. In the study with lab rats, by the 6th generation of inbreeding, the rats were cannibalizing each other. And that's because the brain was no longer producing serotonin. And so they were just plain aggressive. And we believe that is the issue that we've run into with Kazahana. The other thing is also when an animal or person is going through maturity, during that time period, everybody likes to talk about it. Oh, teenager. When a teenage age hits, serotonin actually drops significantly and could very well be the major reason behind why teenagers struggle so much, and also why, you know, say like in dogs, they seem to have a little bit of a brain regression, if you will, and they can also develop behaviors during that time. Hence, hence the time period in which you should be harder on the dog in a way, keeping them more in check with certain things, but having sympathy, because growing is not easy. But for a inbred animal specifically, because they're already so low in serotonin, or serotonin is almost non-existent, things get far worse. Far, far worse for them. It's the same with autistic children. Autistic children, their brain does not produce serotonin properly, and they often get more aggressive and violent during their teenage years. Sorry, I just whacked the camera with my hand. Trying to adjust. So, those are the main issues that we have studied that can and really do occur because of inbreeding. People just kind of like to ignore it, I suppose. I'm not really sure. But there is also a higher increase of physical mutations when you inbreed. Just stuff going wrong. Hence why we will not be doing that kind of sort of thing other than several generations apart. And the way we look at it is you can do that. That's the best way to do it. But don't continuously do it back to the same dog or line, if that makes sense. Because you want to keep the blood clean. You want to continuously introduce new genetics, new lines. It's just what keeps them thrifty. Allergies, all those other things are often related to inbreeding as well. Or breeding continuously to a line, not necessarily the same dogs or what would be considered inbreeding, but to a line that has those problems already in them. But that's the basics of the kinds of things you can run into with inbreeding animals and even people. It's the same in people. It's all the same across the board. The same kind of bad stuff happens. Hence why you should not do it. But that's a topic people don't like to talk about, particularly in the dog breeding world. but we won't be doing that ourselves. Other people can do whatever the heck they want, but it's not good for them. I can tell you that. It's not good for the animals. I think that was all I was going to talk about today. I like to give topics during videos because I feel like it makes things more interesting since the puppies are just sleeping. The little boy I mentioned in the other video, his mom did pull on his umbilical cord after he was born. It was actually already dry, but she decided to obsess over it for some reason, and it caused a bit of an issue. But I think, as far as I can tell, as of right now, because they're still kind of too young to see hernias, but as far as I can tell, he's just going to get away with a funny scar and not an actual umbilical hernia. But I can't say that 100%. He's right here. 100% yet. You need a boy. I'll also keep in mind when a dog has some sort of deformity, that doesn't mean it's due to inbreeding, because there are flukes that happen. Sometimes the chromosomes just mess up. Sometimes the genetics, the genes, whatever the heck you want to call them, just have a blooper and something weird happens. Sassy, for instance, we know with her first litter that she had a baby girl that had a very large inguinal hernia. So if you just went off of, well, that's genetics, then rightfully so, one of these puppies should have one. And they could. We know that's a risk. We took that risk with her. But it's also entirely possible that that girl was a fluke, and she won't ever have one of those again. Or it could have been related to the sire that she was bred to. Could have come from the sire, because there is evidence to show that when it comes to hernias and retained testicles, that it is often related to the sire, the male, and not the female. Because males have a lot to do with passing on pelvic strength. So all the muscles, down in the abdomen and within the pelvis, those are often related to the male when it comes to producing offspring with strong abdominals and pelvic floor. So if you have a male that, say, has a weak pelvic floor or intestinal walls, it could be that he was the cause of a hernia, inguinal specifically, or a retained testicle, and it may not be even related to inbreeding at all. It's just that inbreeding often leads to those things. It could be that inbreeding was further back on the line, but a weak individual was then retained and bred, and that caused the problem. You never really know. We can only go off of actual evidence and not wives' tale or what people just claim or say. There is some truth to some of that, but most of it is just a bunch of hoopla. He's sucking on my finger. You're just sucking on my finger, baby. So we try to go off of things that have actually been more bona fide proven, even if it's, say, like a group of people have actually noticed the same thing. That's more bona fide than just one person saying, oh, well, my great-grandmother, A lot of those things aren't true. It was just based off of a misunderstanding. We try to take all information into account, but prove it out ourselves is what we try to do. She's chewing on me because she's trying to get teeth in, and it's uncomfortable. Anyway, I think that's it. I think I'm gonna be done with the video for today. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope the information's useful. we really enjoy, we really enjoy talking about these sorts of things and spreading as much truth and information as we can, even if we find out later on that maybe that truth was kind of a little off or we need to adjust the way we think about something. It's helpful regardless to move forward and try to do better, because our main purpose, aside from the hope of giving people very solid companions, is that it's for the dogs. So we're trying to do what's best for the dogs, what makes them the most healthy, what allows them to thrive really well. And people aren't doing that nowadays. It's all about the money or show status or bragging rights, honestly, when it should be about what's good for the dogs. And then secondary is for people, because dogs are meant to be companions, and if they don't have the kind of temperament or energy for that, then it just makes life miserable. They're kind of hungry. I don't know that Sassy has anything for you though, baby. I'm gonna put them in the box and say goodbye to you guys. So, bye-bye.